Righting Wrongs is a classic Yoon vehicle from 1986, co-starring American martial art actress Cynthia Rothrock, directed by Corey Yoon, with action by Corey, Yoonbyu, Xiuxia, Meng Hoi, and Samo Hung stunt team Hungaban. The action is dynamic and quintessentially 80s Hong Kong, and it's a showcase for Corey Yoon's unique style of modern action. But there's a major plot twist here, not in the film's storyline, but in the production of the final fight scene that really shocked me when I heard it. But before we get into that, let's have a look at the first part of the final fight of Righting Wrongs. The final fight starts off with some nasty gunshot impacts, and even though at first glance these gunshots seem more violent, they're actually less visceral than in a Western film at the time, where it might have been common to watch somebody slowly bleed out from a gunshot wound and experience pain. So Corey Yoon gets to have his cake and eat it too. Big violent impacts, but not as much viscerality. Nice touch here with the stuntman's helmet coming off when he hits the wing of the plane. This is the kind of secondary effect which sweetens the impact. Add in powder effect and it looks really nasty. Note the fast and sticky poses that people are striking in the frame. This kind of posing feels very unnatural as a performer, but this stickiness allows the audience to quickly understand what's happening in each shot, and this is also a very distinct Corey Yoon style. Rothrock was doubled for her big stunts. They didn't even seem to care about getting a double that looked like her. This one looks like Xiao Ho doing the doubling for this shot. Now, I always wondered what happened to Xiao Ho because he was relegated to really small roles after his starring roles in the late Shaw Brothers films, which were so good, and so it makes you wonder what happened. After this, you only really see him occasionally, like in this shot right here. Now, the action style that Corey Yoon is using here deserves some attention. For someone like Cynthia Rothrock, who has very clean lines thanks to her martial arts background, Corey's able to squeeze every ounce out of her performance. Her shapes are clean, all the impacts are hard. All of this is because Corey knows exactly where to put the camera to make the best out of any given movement. This method of action arguably opened the franchise to allow more forms-based female martial artists to look extremely powerful in the modern era. You could almost call this modern operatic, and it seemed to work really well for Rothrock, and all of her Hong Kong action scenes still stand up to this day. A weird jump cut here in the fight. I never noticed this before, but I guess it doesn't matter because the action's so hectic you can't really tell. Now this stuntman's smart. He puts his hand up to take the kick, and this not only helps him avoid getting kicked, but helps Rothrock know when to pull her kick back. Now Corey Yoon cuts the shot before the stuntman falls and hits the table. This is most likely Chingalok because it's the same fall he did at the end of My Lucky Stars doubling Dick Wei. In the second shot, which is probably a second camera rolling at the same time, you can see the body hit, but it almost looks like the table broke here, so I guess they had to cut out. Now, for the Yoonbyu section of the fight, I assumed that Corey Yoon directed this section, but apparently Corey Yoon had to leave production to go work on another project, which I'm guessing was No Retreat, No Surrender with Jean-Claude Van Damme, also released the same year in 1986. And so Samo Hung stepped in and directed this fight between Yoonbyu and Melvin Wong. Now, while it's safe to just take this at face value, I think it's a good opportunity to also look at the subtle differences and similarities between the styles of the two action directors. The fight starts off with some montage-style editing with some very short shots, sometimes lasting only a single move or two. And this style is very similar to Corey Yoon's previous work, with some small differences. Here's some more fast montage-style action. This part doesn't cut as well because the double starts a second kick, but it cuts to Melvin Wong doing a back fist. I wonder if these shots might have gone a little bit longer in their original form, but they might have been cut down in the edit just to increase tension. And the dolly shot here is only 3 moves. Now, a shot like this can take 20 to 30 minutes just to set up with the rails and everything, but if it's just 3 moves, it's kind of unnecessarily complicated. So again, the original take might have gone a little bit longer. Chingalok also doubles Melvin Wong for his kicks, and this is the same kick he did when doubling Jackie Chan at the end of Dragons Forever. Now, this is sort of a dead giveaway that Samo was behind the camera in both of these fights because it's the same kick from the same angle but done 2 years later. Chingalok always makes this wide silhouette with his arms before he does a move, and he's a left-sided kicker, so you always know that it's him when he's doing moves like this. This fall is ridiculous. It's probably Chung Wing Chung. He was one of the rice-eating bad guys at the end of Pedicab Driver. You can see the wire now in the remaster, and it goes to the ceiling, which is called a pick point, and they just pulled him from off camera, and then they let him go. If they had held on, though, he would have swung forward again at the end. Here's another nice phrase of action with the dolly move, and again, this is a lot of setup time, and the shot only lasts 3 seconds. But it's shots like these that have so much kinetic energy, and they really help keep the fight dynamic. Yoonbyu gets blasted here by a kick done by Chingalok again. It looks like they've got a chest guard under Yoonbyu's shirt, but Chingalok totally misses it and nails Yoonbyu in the neck, and that's why the reaction's so good. It's really hard to see this stuff when you're watching the VHS, but with HD you get to see things that probably the filmmakers never expect we'd ever notice. Here's another nice dolly phrase. Melvin Wong kicks really low, but Yoonbyu still ducks it. So sometimes low, powerful kicks like this come across as even more dangerous than high kicks. Melvin's kicking lines are actually pretty good, too. I always like it when a character is struggling to get up after falling rather than lying there writhing on the ground. It just adds to the danger, like they're not going to let this fall take them out of the fight. And you see the same thing in real life, even with average people. When adrenaline's flowing, they don't really get hurt when they fall down. They just get up, and the pain comes later. You can also see the pad on the ground smushing under his hand. It's probably just a 2-incher. But yes, everyone, even Hong Kong stuntmen use pads. They're just really good at hiding them. Here's another nice use of montage to sell an action gag. Yunbyu does a kip-up mid-shot to escape the scissor takedown. This is the kind of stuff you can only really do when your star is a stuntman. Here's Chingalok doubling Melvin Wong for the kicks with a mustache painted on. Again, his arms making that unique silhouette. Now here's a habit that always crops up in Hong Kong style fight scenes. It's called telegraphing. Now as Wong is throwing his punch, he's already anticipating ducking Yunbyu's hook punch. The average viewer might not be able to discern this on first viewing, but there's still something lost. It can start to feel too choreographed. Now, if I sound like I'm picking on Wong, I'm not. This is endemic to the Hong Kong style of action, and that's always the game we're trying to play, memorizing a long string of movements, but still acting like we're improvising the entire time. It's incredibly difficult. Speaking of improvising, there's a cool fail moment here for Yunbyu trying to pull at Wong's hair, then his tank top, and none of it working. It really shows that Yunbyu's thinking on his feet. Yunbyu showing his Cantonese opera level control right here, hitting that barrel perfectly. It could have gone sideways if he had clipped his head on the corner. You can see the pad on the ground moving in this shot. It's already got some dents in it, so this probably isn't the first take of this fall. And this is one of the best moments in Hong Kong cinema history right here. It starts with an impact shot to Melvin Wong's head, where it actually makes contact. So we believe he's actually taking damage. They did this with a soft shoe, a sort of padded sole, kind of like an orthopedic looking shoe. The powder and grime coming off the shoe when it hits him is like a secondary impact again. Then it goes to the 540 and he hits the double. It's just the perfect impact too, because it's with his toe and it makes the stuntman's head jerk first before his body. Whereas normally when they do a 540 impact shot, they'll aim for the chest and it's going to look safer. But this is just an incredible shot. Look at the technique. It's moments like this that really make Hong Kong action something special. The stomp to the knee drop can only really work in a shot like this. If the frame had been wider, it would have been really awkward looking. Foregrounding the weapon again, what a cool shot. It's like we're playing Doom or something. Again, we're on a dolly, and it's a whole setup just for a couple seconds of screen time. Now, if it's true that Samo is behind the action here, he's basically just doing the same thing that Corey Yoon did earlier. He falls on the ground in this next shot and just keeps sliding. You can see the wire dragging him. Here's another awesome montage shot with some smart choreography. Little inserts where Yunbyu is just trying to get away, but Wong's on top of him. Notice how close the shots are, too, and how quick the sequence flies by, but we get exactly what's happening. So let's look at the rhythm that Samo is going for here. His sequences tend to start with some kind of introductory phrase, usually on a dolly, or sometimes on a tripod with a zoom. And this shot has 6 to 8 moves, lasting maybe 2 seconds on a medium or medium-wide angle. Then we get in closer for 2 more moves or so, then more close-ups to explore where the rest of the sequence goes, usually with just a single movement per shot. With some really close shots, the entire sequence is only 7 seconds here, with 8 shots. And if we ignore the first introductory phrase, we're talking about less than a second per shot. Now, it's been said that Bourne Identity ruined action cinema forever because of its close angles, rapid-fire editing, and shaky cam. But barring the shaky cam, if we compare this righting wrong sequence to a Bourne Ultimatum sequence, and I'm thinking about the beginning of that fight with Jody Ansa who played Dash, the shot length is roughly the same, about 0.75 seconds per shot. And the framing is the same too. It's very close up and borders on impressionistic. But the difference here is that Samo is framing up each individual shot. Each one is like a painting. But in the Bourne action scenes, everything is shot in lengthy master shots, and then it's cut up after the fact into some rapid-fire editing pattern. This shooting style is what's known as coverage shooting. The camera team is literally just covering the action from as many angles as possible, and in a sense, they're sort of covering themselves, so the editor can't blame them later on for missing a piece of action. Now the problem is, in coverage shooting, you don't have time to paint a beautiful picture in every shot. It just takes way longer than any Hollywood studio would allow. Rather, the goal in coverage is simply to capture all the ideas in the action. And this is Greengrass's action style in a nutshell. We see an object, bodies move about, something breaks, then we see the result, cause and effect. Now, one might make the case that this cause-effect style of action is actually tapping into something psychologically really deep within Western audiences in 2002 when Greengrass first deployed this method, but that's for another action essay. Now, the editor's job on a Bourne film is to find the best options from 7 or 8 different shots that are available to them, and it becomes a sort of editing puzzle that can go a lot of different ways depending on how these shots are edited together. But the Righting Wrongs editor doesn't even have a choice. This shot can only be followed by this shot, followed by this shot. These aren't coverage shots. So all this is to say that there are 3 myths I'm sort of debunking here. First off, Hong Kong modern action films done by the likes of Corey Yuen and Samo Hung don't, on average, have long takes. Secondly, they don't really use many wide angles. Many of these are tighter, medium shots. And third, fast editing can actually be totally intelligible. In fact, the design of sequences like these is so good that the editing and framing are practically invisible, and we come away thinking we've just watched a single take of widely framed action. That's the power of camera and editing, and these guys were absolutely at the top of their game when it came to filmmaking. Comparing this to Corey Yuen's action in Yes Madam the year before, the cadence is roughly the same. A longer opening phrase followed by some montage shots, but perhaps with some more props. He'll sometimes let the montage shots play a little bit longer too. Meng Hoi's action in Royal Warriors the same year as Righting Wrongs has a slightly slower editing cadence, and again with an emphasis on environment and props. And this is the style of Corey's earlier fights in Righting Wrongs. So we might even imagine a more Corey Yuen style version of the Yuen Biao and Melvin Wong fight involving more props and weapons, but Samo keeps it almost entirely hand-to-hand, which is definitely in keeping with his style in that time period. Alright, before we get to the end, Chingarlok takes a nasty bump into the scaffolding. He had a huge career in doubling people for kicks and falls. This guy is one of the best. Definitely check him out in the Hong Kong Stuntman documentary. Alright, now let's recap the story of the fight choreography. Rothrock relies first on her gun and dexterity, and the bad guys try and corner her with various props in the scene, but she's soon outnumbered, she's disarmed, and is forced to fight hand-to-hand against multiple opponents, taking more damage. The bad guys never think of picking up the gun, and maybe that's why we never see it actually hit the ground. It just sort of disappears, and we accept this. She uses her dexterity again to change levels and fight the multiple enemies in a smaller space, which is obviously just a big setup to justify a big fall for her before she's killed by the villain with a drill. Yuen Biao shows up, and this is presumably when Samo takes over. He rejects a bribe and engages Melvin Wong in a hand-to-hand fight. On the one hand, this is Samo's specialty in action design, but it's also justified because this is a personal issue between them. It's more important now for the one to dominate the other without the use of objects or weapons, because winning a hand-to-hand fight is the more just kind of fight that they can have here. And it removes the risk that one might accidentally kill the other, which would make for a legal mess that neither of them really cares to have at this point. The first block of choreo climaxes when Melvin Wong gets tossed, but shows he's got a strong counterattack. The villain kicks off the second block of choreo, but Yuen Biao counters with acrobatic escapes, so Wong resorts to using his muscles and tosses Yuen Biao around like a rag doll, winning the second block. There are music cues during the intermissions between the blocks of action, but otherwise the scene has no soundtrack, which was actually standard for 80s Hong Kong fight scenes. This is worth noting for the filmmakers out there. You don't always need music to keep your action moving. Block 3 is the last and biggest chunk of choreo, starting with Yuen Biao rushing in, showing acrobatic prowess with the 540, which is a false victory because it only sends Wong into a rage, like Bennett from Commando, and he rushes Yuen Biao for the rest of the third block, but Yuen Biao counters again with acrobatic kicks and accents it with the Hail Mary, winning the third block. Realizing that the hero's got a motor on him, Wong's the one who resorts to grabbing the pistol off the ground, the point of no return where the villain is now truly desperate. The rest of the sequence has some great high-concept stunts. Airplanes blowing up, a Commando moment where Yuen Biao chases Melvin Wong's airplane, and an Indiana Jones moment where he's dragged by the airplane while holding a rope. High-concept scenes like these are designed to compete with American action films coming out at the same time. Yuen Biao dangling by the rope here is awesome, and no doubt he's being held by a wire, but the stunt is no less impressive. This part's done on the ground with clever photography. By now, the edit has earned our trust. We think that Yuen Biao is the one actually doing the airplane stunts. And on VHS and even DVD, you might continue thinking that. But the remaster here shows that he's being doubled by a white guy. And based on the shots leading up to this moment, this sequence doesn't even seem to be done in Hong Kong. There are no shots with this airplane in particular and the set hangar in the same frame. A quick internet search revealed that Griffin AG Air Limited is a New Zealand company, and so this is most likely shot in New Zealand. Maybe because it was too expensive to do this in Hong Kong. Some nice aerobatic maneuvers here. All the interior is shot on the ground, of course. And like that, Yuen Biao hatchets Melvin Wong to death and he's dead. The jump from the plane is done by a skydiver with a parachute, probably the same white guy from earlier. Yuen Biao being dangled upside down on a wire to simulate the fall. This fall into the water could have just been done off a crane or a bridge. Now I gotta admit, when I first saw this, I was pretty bummed that Yuen Biao's character died. But there's an alternate ending on the Mandarin release where Yuen Biao is rescued and tried in court. so fans got to see him live in that version. In the Hong Kong version, though, he dies. And perhaps this is because there is this sort of unwritten rule in heroic bloodshed which says, if you kill someone, then your blood pays for his, even if you're the hero. Thank you for watching. Make sure you join my Telegram channel at t.me/EricJacobus. I post a lot of additional updates there. My website is ericjacobus.com, which has my written material. You can watch Righting Wrongs right now in HD in the original Cantonese at hayatv.com. Look for the link in the description below. And make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks.